Hey, this is Steve coming at you with a little recap of my year in books. And I would encourage you to share yours with me. Put in the comments what you read that you really loved this year, what I should add to my list of things to read. I encourage you to be my buddy on Goodreads, and I'll put in the description how to do that. We're looking at my year in books, and I've read kind of a lot. I would say about half of this is in audiobooks, which I have just started into this year. Earlier this year, I found the app Libby. No sponsorship money or anything, but I started using Libby earlier this year. So I'm just constantly where I would have been listening to podcasts. Now I'm listening to library books. And so I think I've probably read about 45 books in print. I'm just glad to be taking in content. It's all about absorbing that content, however it gets in my head. And so I just wanted to say, what I really liked this year and what I didn't like so much. And yeah, my first review of the year was that I was giving up at 80% and did not like Anthony Bourdain's writing at all. Some notes about some of these. I'll just pick some at random. Snowfall is worth your look. It's a multimedia New York Times thing about the Tunnel Creek avalanche up in Washington State. And Jim Steenberg's Greatest Snow on Earth, Secrets of the Greatest Snow on Earth was super cool about snow science. And I loved the Area X trilogy includes Annihilation, Acceptance, and Authority, or maybe it's Annihilation, Authority, and Acceptance. And they were mind-changing books for me. I rarely read a book that changes how I think about literature or how I think about how stories can be told. And these three books did that for me, just like his Born series did at the end of last year. And Jeff Vandermeer, if you're not a reader yet, you ought to be. I liked but didn't love Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower. It gets a lot of great reviews, and I can see why, but I think it maybe just wasn't my cup of tea. I felt like I had read that story before. I really enjoyed New York 2140, and I want to read more Kim Stanley Robinson. This is the first thing I've read of his. Apparently, he's a mega famous sci-fi writer, but this was new to me and I liked it very much. I really found, so you'll notice there are a lot of like craft books in here, like how to write, suggestions about writing. I really liked Jane Allison's Meander, Spiral, and Explode. It was about new kinds of or differing kinds of plot patterns in stories that we can think about as we write our stories. The Wonder Book was awesome as a not just a manual, like a how-to for writing by Jeff Vandermeer, but really good with like prompts and ideas and just like kind of wild ways of seeing things. It's really awesome. It's probably my favorite how-to book or writing book. And I think every classroom should have it and every writer should have it. Every aspiring writer needs to have it. To Sleep in a Sea of Stars was not my favorite. I think I bailed at about 85 or 90% of this too long book because I didn't care about the characters anymore. Here's the thing. This is what I'm looking for. Whenever I find a book that I'm not a fan of, I think about what I can avoid. What I learned from this book was that the dialogue can break a story. I mean, rarely does a dialogue make a story, but there are probably experts out there who do a much better job of me that with the dialogue alone can just drag somebody through your book and make it amazing. But in this story, the dialogue didn't match the motivations of the characters as I understood them. And so it felt like the author was breaking the rules of the story that he had created. Normal was fantastic. And I got to Warren Ellis by looking at like trying to find books like Jeff Vandermeer's. Dark Matter was fine. Kindly Ones was awfully depressing, and it's the first time I've ever gotten through the whole thing after trying several times. Really love Ursula K. Le Guin. I didn't like this as much as Lathe of Heaven, but it was good. And KJ Parker, as always, the fantasy that KJ Parker puts together is hilarious and entertaining. You'll notice, again, lots of stuff about writing here. I really liked Stein on writing. The guy was pompous as all get out, but the craft was there and the suggestions were there. That was great. Joyce Carol Oates, I really liked her story about Marilyn Monroe, but I don't even remember Hazards of Time Travel, and I don't know if I loved it or hated it. Okay, there you go. 3 out of 5 stars. That is not a great review for me. My average review is up over 4 usually, or at 4 or thereabouts. Ready Player One was good and was much better than I think I read around the same time that story about the kid in the in the outer space, and I forget what it is, but everybody loves it a lot more than I did. I'll come across it here. Um, I liked. I mean, I reread Shutter Island. I've read it before and love it. And Mystic River was really good, really well done. Oh yeah, so Orson Scott Card, Ender's Game was the book that I mean, I finished it out of a sense of duty, but it was not good. Did not like it at all, and didn't like How to Write Science Fiction. Surprise, by Orson Scott Card. Helm and the Shiver was like urban fantasy, maybe, with some queer characters, I think, and it was really like really an interesting take, but it just didn't feel like my cup of tea. So that was one of those ones where I was like, I can see why somebody would love this, but it wasn't my favorite. Four Kids Walk into a Bank is an awesome story about kids robbing a bank and bad things that happen. And I keep it in my classroom, and it is the number one most withdrawn graphic novel that I have, and probably the most borrowed book that I have in my whole collection. Really liked User by Devin Grayson. This is like where I started to get into like game literature, and specifically game literature in graphic novel format. Read The Measure because it was on a bunch of lists, and it was fine. It was a great idea, and it was entertaining. I think that's kind of where I landed with that. And as I said, Blonde was fantastic. It was amazing. In Real Life was great. Bird Box, great. I like Bird Box enough that I immediately went and got the sequel. And I hated the movie, really didn't like the movie, but Josh Mallerman's writing was fantastic. Patron Saints of Nothing, that's a YA kind of contemporary mystery, maybe possibly thriller. I don't know how it's shelved, but awesome. I couldn't read Universal Harvester. I got some 100 pages into it, realized that this person writes like I do without an editor, and I had to stop. Zone 1, Colson Whitehead, you might know from the I wanted to say Nickelback Boys, but it's probably not Nickelback. And the Underground Railroad, I think, and really well regarded. This is a zombie book, and it was really good. It was a unique take on zombies. I always like to read those unique takes on like old patterns. A Cabin at the End of the World is being made into a movie this year, and it is bizarre, and I really enjoyed it. Super weird twist and take on the cabin in the woods kind of setup. Really weird. Only Good Indians and Stephen Graham Jones. Oh my gosh, new favorite horror author here in The Only Good Indians. Can't recommend it enough. Lovecraft Country is kind of like a mix between that horror genre and the weird fiction that I found in Vandermeer. And then, of course, you can tell I started reading more in the area that I'm writing in right now. And David Moranis had a great book about his dad being hassled by the House on Un-American Activities Committee. You've got Demagogue in here. Here begins my trek through Grady Hendrix, and I love Grady Hendrix as well, just like Stephen Graham Jones. Horror Store is my favorite of Grady Hendrix, and it basically it's The Shining in an IKEA. A House at the Bottom of the Lake was pretty good. I think they made that into a thing. Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix, amazing book, not good movie. I was excited when they were making it into a movie. My Heart is a Chainsaw, I can't go on enough. I'm gonna gift a copy of this book to somebody tomorrow, and it's good when you feel compelled to buy a book and send it to somebody, or to hand it to somebody and say you need to read this. It's a good book about a girl who becomes obsessed with the idea that there's a slasher flick happening in her hometown. Fantastic. A lot of like meta commentary and like self-aware stuff about what happens in slasher films, and like bending the rules of slashers. And I would say that Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires was also a great take on a vampire story. Really awesome. Woods Are Always Watching was fine and not great. Welcome to Night Vale, I couldn't even finish it. I'm not afraid to put a book down, but I wouldn't put any stars on it if I didn't get very far into it. But this the medium works so much better on their podcast that when they tried to stretch it out into a novel, I thought that it kind of fell apart plot wise. Black Klansman, great story, didn't love the writing, it was fine. I'm glad I read it. I didn't see the movie yet, but that's on my list. I liked George Will's book, and especially if you're of a liberal persuasion, you should read what like what a reasonable conservative sounds like, what you might call a respectable conservative sounds like. Gifted School, I couldn't finish that one. It was just not compelling to me at all. And really, like, I have read Enemies before. I like that. It's worthwhile. The story about J. Robert Oppenheimer and Ethel Rosenberg both changed my view, not of literature and the world, but of American history in a way that I didn't expect. And I would highly recommend either of those. You might know that there's a movie coming out next summer in July, 23 July, by Aaron Sorkin that focuses on J. Robert Oppenheimer. So this is my pre Aaron Sorkin movie release preparation. What Moves the Dead is fantastic horror. It's a retelling of a Poe story, Fall of the House of Usher. Definitely recommend it. I Must Betray You was like the year's hit YA, and it's in some ways it's like almost the same book that I wrote in 2017 that I'm looking for a publisher for now, and it's done extremely well. It's set in Romania, 1989, and some of the themes are similar. It's not the same story, but so the themes are similar, and some of her approach to storytelling is similar to mine, and I really like it. It's a good comp for me, good comparison book for me. Paulin's Cooked was entertaining. Tender is the Flesh, delicious. This is a story about a time in the future when think of it as like Camus' The Stranger meets Soylent Green. It's a time in the future when cannibalism becomes socially acceptable and even kind of like smiled toward or smiled upon. And Camilla Sten's Lost Village, I was surprised by. It's a spooky village, a spooky rundown village, and it's a new take on that. And this is, I believe that Camilla Sten is a Scandinavian writer, and this is definitely Scandinavian horror, if that means anything to you. Aurora was entertaining. I just finished that one, and I loved The Living Dead. Daniel Krause's characterization, and then actually I have to say, this was one that I listened to as an audiobook, and the voice acting was fantastic. That contributed a lot to me enjoying this, but it was also extremely well written, and it's a new take. Again, I like these kind of old tropes with a new take. And Daniel Krause, I was lucky enough to meet him in August at the League of Utah Writers Conference in 22, and super nice guy. And we talked about horror to the point at which I realized I'm actually a fan of horror. I didn't think that I was before that. The reason that Tender is the Flesh is the last review of the year is because it's the last thing I took the time to write, but I loved it and I would totally recommend it. I still have 2 more books to go, and I'm definitely going to get there. I'm almost done with 2 paper books that I'm reading, or like physical books, and I'm in the middle of 2 audiobooks that I really like a lot. So if you want to share what you're reading or what you read this year, I would definitely love to hear from you. And that's all I got today. I just want to share about books because I love them.